This reading is from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It's called From Generation to Generation. And I was reminded of it because I've been reading a wonderful book about families. Families out in the world, families in congregations, the congregation as a family system itself, and the human family beyond us. In a house which becomes a home, one hands down and another takes up the heritage of mind and heart, laughter and tears, musings and deeds. Love, like a carefully loaded ship, crosses the gulf between the generations. Therefore, we do not neglect the ceremonies of our passage when we wed, when we die, when we are blessed with a child. When we depart and when we return, when we plant and when we harvest. So let us bring up our children. It is not the place of some official to hand to them their heritage. If others impart to our children our knowledge and ideals, they will lose all of us that is wordless and full of wonder. Let us build memories in our children, lest they drag out joyless lives, lest they allow treasures to be lost because they have not been given the keys. We live not by things, but by the meanings of things. It is needful to transmit the passwords from generation to generation. The oldest roommate I have ever had was about 95 years old. A roommate in a hospital. The youngest roommate I have ever had was 15 minutes old in a hospital. These two people never met, and yet in a way they are bookends to my life experience. The older woman's name was Polly Norris, and she lived on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. When I met her in the hospital, she was extremely frail, and it wasn't very clear how long she would live. I was released from the hospital before she was, and I waited for her release. And then I went to visit her house on the lake. And there she was, a little pixie with short white hair, very, very tiny. And there I was, feeling very, very depressed, which was why I was in the hospital to begin with. And as I walked around her house, I noticed photographs on all the tables in the living room, the dining room, the bedroom, and I didn't recognize anyone in them. And I walked up to one picture and I said, "Polly, who is this?" And she started laughing and she said, "Julie, that's me." And I said, "How old are you here?" To which she said, "I'm 19. And it was one of those moments when I thought to myself, we meet people where they are at the moments we meet them. And if we meet them late in life, we have no idea really of who they were before they got to late in life. If we meet them when they're younger, we get to see them growing. We get to see them changing. In fact, for most of us, I think it's really by watching children that we notice how time passes, that we really see the passage of time and the process of change in who we are and how we experience one another. One day on the bus to New York several years ago, I was sitting with a woman who started talking about her children, and I said, "Do you have a favorite age for your children?" And she said, "Yes. My favorite age was when they were 3. And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Oh, I love 3-year-olds. I just love them." At the time, her children were teenagers, and my daughter was only 2. And I said, "Well, I'm really enjoying 2. And the next year, when my daughter became 3, I thought, well, I can see what she was getting at. 3 is a really good age, too. In fact, all ages can be good, can't they? If we take our childish spirits with us and we hold on to some of the child inside us as we age. Now, I asked you before if many of you had had the experience of your child discovering that you had once been a child. Has each of you who has children had that experience of showing pictures of yourselves to your children? Yeah. For me, one of the most striking moments in this development was visiting friends with my daughter, who was then 2.5. I was on one side of the living room, and my friend with whom I was staying was at the other side, and she said, Julie, could you come over here and do this for me? And my daughter, Zoe, turned around the room, and she was totally confused. So my friend just kept going, Julie, come over here. And Zoe said, my name's not Julie. Who's Julie? And my friend said, that's your mother. No, my mother is Mama. And it was like watching a light bulb go on. The realization that I too was a person, that I too had a name, that other people did not know me the way she knew me, that I was Julie. Now, interestingly, as she's gotten older, my daughter has taken to calling me Mother. And she says that the way some mothers say their children's names, as in Peter, or Billy. Look, here's someone. So when my daughter calls me up, I'll say, hi, Zoe, how are you? And she said, well, Mother. If she's in a bad mood, or if she's in a good mood, she'll say, Mother, it's so nice to talk to you. And don't you all know from the tone of voice what's going on? There is something going on in the shifting of the relationship. Now, not all of us perhaps are parents, but each of us is indeed someone else's child. Some of us still carry the child inside us. Some of us are very much in touch with the child inside us. We celebrate that child. We play like children, we laugh like children. We give ourselves up to being free in the way that children are free before they are trained by their parents to be less free. Some of us are ancestors. All of us are descendants. We are the lucky gene pool. We are those who have survived across the sands of time. We are the manifestation of life moving through time. And as this life force moves, we carry within us the bloodlines and the storylines that shape our bodies and shape our behaviors, that shape our values and shape our beliefs. Each of us is a genetic scrapbook, and we share a lot of genetic material with our siblings, with our relatives. We also share chapters in the narratives of our lives with some of those people. But as we grow up and individuate and move away from the families that spawned us, we develop new chapters that come from our relationships with the world outside, with our friends, and sometimes not so much with our families of origin. If you look around you, again, right now, just look around for a second. You will see that although each of us is different, each of us is connected in a primordial way with everyone else. We know from DNA and genetic testing that human life began in a specific place and that it then moved on around the world. We may have not kept up with how our families moved around the world, but nevertheless, here we are today. Right here in this very room, we stand with our extended human family, with our particular family of faith, and with 4 generations of one particular family, those who are related to Barb and her daughters. Barb has told me that her daughters are 7th generation Unitarian Universalists. 7th generation. Now, if you think about that in a biblical sense, that's a really powerful thing. 7 in numerology is a very powerful number, and there are many references throughout the Hebrew Bible about the 7th generation and things coming to pass in the 7th generation, especially the 7th son of the 7th son and the 7th son of the 7th son, in your case, your daughters. Now, we think that we outgrow our families, that we outgrow what feels like the control of our families and their values. But in some ways, we do not. We carry our ideas about the world and our ideas about relationships with us. And they have come from the family where we started. The family is the place where we learn to love, where we hopefully learn to let ourselves be loved, where we learn to wage peace and to make war, to laugh, to cry, to deal with frustration, to negotiate getting along with other people. Different families have different rates of success with this, but each of us goes through this process of socialization that begins in a family, usually in a triangle. Not always, but usually, with two parents and one child. And then as other children come along, that triangle spreads. You now have a quadrangle. Some of us have pentangles. Some of us have, I don't even know the words for them, pentagons, hexagons, whatever. We move out into relationships through practicing the relationships of our family ties. Now, the past replicates itself in many surprising ways, and sometimes we pay no attention to that. We are unconscious about it. But if you were to make a map of your family, a genogram, as psychologists call it, and you looked at the pairings of people in your family and at the relationships between their siblings, you would notice that many patterns repeat themselves across the generations of a family system. It is important that you notice this, that you are aware that although you are an individual within a system, you are in a system. And when you come into this congregation, you bring that system with you. You cannot entirely erase the system that raised you. You bring it with you. Each of you has brought a family history with you into this room. And do you know, I have brought a family history with me into this room. And together, when we are here, we create a larger family history of this congregation. And within this congregation, we determine relationships that are subtly and sometimes very obviously affected by those other relationships that we have gone through. It's important in congregational life that we learn pathways to peace, that we are able to negotiate with each other, to express our differences, to make room for our differences, to allow each other space to breathe and to be who we are. And the more we consider our own histories, the more capable we are of letting go of projections onto other people that are really about the stories of where we came from. How we imprint or rebel against the stories we've been told and the traditions in which we have participated over the years of our lives says a lot about how we operate as adults in the world, and certainly how we operate in a congregation. There are major life cycle events like births, deaths, and marriages that are occasions that often trigger enormous anxieties in families. Have any of you ever been at a wedding where one person got really drunk and acted a little crazy or stupid or downright mean? Have you ever been at a family event, a funeral, where arguments broke out about whether someone would be cremated or buried, whether someone was going to have religious language used at the service or not? What about at the birth of a child, when parents who are no longer together argue over who gets to go there first and see the child? What about all those family occasions? And they're coming, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, perhaps Kwanzaa, when large groups of your family come together. Sometimes people you haven't seen in a long time, sometimes people you are very close to and on very good terms with. Somewhere underneath the anticipation, there is some anxiety about what might happen. Who's going to comment? Who's going to do this? Who will control? Who will be open to flow? These things go on all the time, whether we notice them or not, and the fact of the matter is that we all go through these experiences. Today we are celebrating a life cycle event, the dedication of Alexis and Emily. they are officially recognized today and welcomed by this congregation. And in doing that, we as a congregation take on a commitment to being additional parents, surrogate parents, complementary, supplementary parents to these children. We cannot ignore that they are here, for they are the future. They are the generation that is coming out of us. So, I'd like to read you the words of the service, and I'm going to invite Barb and Eric to come forward with your kids, and we will start the blessing and the dedication.